Hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar, our cloud-based disaster recovery solutions. Today I will be joined by Stacy Budd, who's our principal pre-sales consultant. My name is Christophe Bertrand. I'm the VP of Product Marketing here at Arcserve. So let's get going, let's get started. We're going to talk a little bit about our solution, about who we are first, because that's a very important factor in us bringing this great solution to market. First of all, we're a global company. We have many customers around the world and many partners as well, and have a presence that you can see is pretty wide. We've been very successful with our technology. In the past 3.5 years, we have become an independent company again, and that gives us a very unique position in the market for this reason. We've, again, amassed a number of awards, and more recently have also made some acquisitions and added technology to our portfolio. So what I'd like to do today is talk to you a little bit about the backup and recovery gap. It's something that really matters to us as the solution provider, and our focus being the mid-market. What we've identified for our customers who range from organizations that could be in the 250, 500 employees up to thousands of employees, but typically mid-market organizations are characterized by having, in our view and what our experience is, a very interesting set of challenges. First of all, they are very much like enterprise type of challenges. You still have a number of expectations associated with service levels. You have a number of risks associated with the overall environment, the IT environment, and from a disaster recovery perspective, of course, a number of additional dimensions that come into play. That combined with the fact that, unlike in larger enterprises, you don't have necessarily access to a very wide team of specialists, you rely essentially on IT generalists, and that's great. And if you're listening today, you probably fall in this category. Ourselves, as a business, we're a mid-market company, so we understand this very well. What it comes down to from a business continuity and disaster recovery perspective is the fact that essentially there's very little tolerance, if any, for downtime, especially for mission-critical environments. So you're stuck between having essentially those enterprise requirements, but not necessarily the enterprise budget or skill set. So that applies to the fact that you could have a very decentralized organization with branch offices and maybe retail locations for some of you, and at the same time a variety of platforms to protect, with, of course, the now addition of cloud-based solutions and the possibility of leveraging cloud. So let's go to the next slide. So what we've done is we've built a portfolio of solutions that comes from the on-premise world, but really plays nicely in cloud environments in a number of facets, number of fashions. First of all, we do support public cloud. You can back up to an Amazon or an Azure. We have great capabilities for those platforms. We also do great protection of data hosted in both environments. So we're really a cloud-focused organization in terms of our technology. This is what we call a hybrid solution, in that you will have a local / on-premise component to your disaster recovery makeup, and then cloud is leveraged as a destination, as an offline copy capability, as an active disaster recovery site, etc. Many possibilities. The other technology that I'd like to talk to you about today, and actually Stacy in a few minutes will demonstrate for us, is Arcserve Cloud Direct. So this is a direct-to-cloud, it's a disk-to-cloud type of solution. In other words, there's nothing on-premise. It goes essentially straight to our cloud infrastructure, and from there you can easily perform a number of operations, including running from that environment, or recovering data, files, or even all systems, or running those systems through virtual images directly from the cloud, the Arcserve Cloud. So this is definitely a solution that works really well for many organizations. And if you're a channel partner joining us today, it's also a great way for you to add capabilities to offer to your end users. So on the next slide, you will see that our solution really takes, again, two dimensions. One that is the hybrid and one that is the direct-to-cloud. So on the hybrid side of the environment, here you would have, by definition, a backup that goes to a local, what we call a recovery point server, a local server. And that's a very good scenario, especially for the larger type of data centers you may have, or your primary location, if you will. So we can back up virtual machines, physical machines, back up to disk, to tape. Obviously, our first destination is tape. We include in our solution great data deduplication, as well as the ability to back up to another recovery point server, including an appliance. We also provide an appliance solution. Again, that's for the on-premise component of the hybrid cloud offering. We can also, as I mentioned earlier, send that data off to public cloud, including, for example, for tape replacement. That's a very good use case. Or to your disaster recovery site, for those of you who have one, or maybe it's a hosted type of facility where a service provider helps you with that component. So that's kind of the phase one, if you will, the first part of the portfolio that I wanted to talk about, and some great capabilities here that we can deliver. So if I look more closely now at the direct-to-cloud solution, it's different in that in this solution, there is nothing on-premise. You will go essentially install an agent on the machines you're protecting, and it's going to take that data and optimize the transfer. We have great WAN technology and optimization, so it goes straight to our cloud. We have two flavors. One of them is backup as a service. So that automatically protects the files that you've elected to protect. You can manage everything from a web console, so any sort of function, if you will, that or process you want to perform, ranging from disaster recovery, backup and recovery, scheduling, or just licensing type of things, you can essentially do from a web-based console. It also gives you access to your data from anywhere that supports, again, a web connection. So that is a great benefit, and that's backup as a service. It does not give you disaster recovery, but if you add that service, we can help you do a lot more than just backing up and recovering files and folders or whole systems. We can actually give you a solution that has a very quick recovery time objective, wherein in less than 5 minutes, we can stand up a virtual environment for you. And by the way, it's a push-button operation, meaning we've already removed a lot of the human intervention that typically happens when you have to fail over or go recover from a disaster recovery site. A lot of the little details that really get in the way, for example, VPN type of configurations, firewalls, etc. So we truly create a virtual private network for you, or virtual environment for you, so you can go back and launch those systems on virtual machines. We provide also, as part of the service, an automated disaster recovery testing capability, and actually in a demo I think you'll see that, where we go and make sure that we can bring up those virtual machines and we can see that login screen or that console very easily, and that gives us the guarantee, the certainty that we are ready to recover you at any time. So these are the two direct-to-cloud offerings. Let's delve a little deeper into first the backup as a service, and then we'll move to the disaster recovery solution. I mentioned earlier that it is web-based, so I will not go into more details here because you're going to get to see that in a lot of detail in a second. I just want to point out that this is a solution that's that's been created by experts in the management and building and of data centers, and we have great technology and great experts in our business who truly understand security, truly understand encryption, truly understand the transfer, optimizing transfer of data over networks, and more importantly, I think the one thing that you'll notice here is that from an economic perspective, there's nothing on-premise, so you go straight to cloud. So you've removed an appliance, you've removed a server from the economic equation. Again, this is a great use case for decentralized type of environments where you want to have your backups go straight to cloud, where you can't really afford to have IT personnel on site, or you don't wish to have IT personnel or equipment on site. That is something we believe is one of the best use cases for you. We offer for the backup service many recovery options, meaning that you can not only recover multiple versions of the files and folders and systems that you've protected with our cloud service, but also do it in a way that is flexible, whether you're using a mounted drive or a virtual server, etc. And then the final point is that we provide a level of automation that really plays nicely to your favorite applications, such as SQL and Exchange. And that combined with, again, a very easy to use, very easy to understand console, and you'll see for yourselves in a minute, makes it a very powerful solution. So what does that mean in terms of platform support? I hinted at a couple of applications here. In terms of environments, we do protect essentially the Hyper-V and VMware hypervisor environments. Those are obviously primary hypervisors in the market, and we support a variety of operating systems that are listed here. That includes Mac as well, and some additional environments like Linux, for example, are listed here. If we go now to the next slide, you get to see the workflow, which is really the architecture of our backup as a service. It looks a little technical here, but really, when you look at the numbers and follow along, it's a pretty simple process. First of all, we install an agent, which is on a server, but it could be a laptop, could be essentially any protected host. And then based on that, after you've configured what it is that you want to back up, and in a backup cloud, which is the Arcserve cloud, we're going to transmit the data over to our cloud. And again, that happens without any intermediate type of gateway. And would you like to save a local copy? You can certainly do that, no problem there. We support that as well. But you don't need to do that, is the point I want to make. It's not a requirement that you first go to a gateway or an appliance. And then should anything come up after we've, of course, saved the data on our data centers, and by the way, there are more data centers coming online, so this picture is likely to evolve over time. By the way, our data centers are, as I said, they're fully secure. They're SOC 1 type of data centers. This is obviously a great way for you to also protect against security type of attacks, including ransomware, by having your data to a secondary location with a very, very different security profile than you may have, say, in a retail type of location. And then should anything come up, should anything need to change, you can manage everything from our portal, our web-based console, again, from anywhere that has access to the internet. Moving on to the disaster recovery as a service, it's an add-on, right? The backup is great. It gives you the ability to recover files and multiple versions of those, but wouldn't it be nice if you could actually get a system back up and running in a matter of minutes and have that available so you could keep your business going and potentially later, fail back. Obviously, you probably want to get your data back where it belongs. The point I want to make here is this is really the next level of availability. Recovery point objective is going to be in a few hours. That's about to change. Stay tuned. We have a lot more technology coming into play to optimize the amount of data that is current and how current it is. Right now it's a few hours, but the good news is that the recovery time is only a few minutes. So literally you can stand up that environment in as long as it takes for us to stand up the virtual machines. I mentioned the fact that it has a tremendous amount of security that has been built in. We take this very seriously, and we have designed it again with, a number of typical use cases in mind. One of them, of course, is security focused, and it's the ability for you to get back on your feet after a ransomware attack, for example. The good news is that this is very easy to configure, very easy to set up. We provide fantastic support, and we help you also with the setup of the environment, give you a little hand-holding when you first start. And one thing I want to point out, and maybe we can move to the next slide, is the fact that there's no surprise with us, no hidden cost at all. And we really provide that solution for you in a way that automates a lot of the capabilities that you would normally take number of steps that you would normally take manually. And one of the examples I can give you is, again, the fact that you don't have to worry about having to figure out the VPNs and the firewalls. We pre-provision that for you. You get really your virtual, what we call the virtual customer cloud, that includes all of those components, and that's really invaluable because in many cases in a disaster recovery scenario, when really you have a problem, you really have to fail over quickly. It's hard sometimes to have all of those processes in mind, or sometimes they're not well documented, or you just don't have the right people available when it happens. Remember, things happen usually at the worst possible time. The architecture is very similar to the backup as a service one, but a few differences. Again, we install an agent and we configure the backups and the various parameters associated with it. What again changes here is the fact that we offer some interesting capabilities, especially around the fact that we leverage this virtual private network option capability. We can create for failback type of scenarios, and I think that's one of the examples we'll show at least how that works. The fact that we can create that private connection between our data center and your data center or your location that you need to recover to operate a failback on the on-premise environment. One of the things we can do also that's really cool is take over, for example, imagine you have a problem with one server only on that local site on-premise, but everything else is okay, and maybe there was an issue, the RAID array failed, or something happened to that server or that host that has a number of virtual machines running on it. Well, guess what? We can literally take over that IP address and run that machine from our cloud service for you. So of course there'll be a little bit of latency maybe compared to what it would be running it internally, but at the same time, other applications that rely on it, other users that rely on that server or those machines will feel like it's just still here, it's still working. So that's a great capability that I wanted to point out as well in this context. All right, let's move to the next part of the presentation. So right before we go into more of a demonstration with Stacy, what I'd like to do is just give you a couple examples of how you could use this solution and how some of our customers are using it. So here we're taking the example of a construction type of environment where what you have is a number of job sites that are spread out around around the U.S. actually, with a central office in the Midwest. And what we're talking about here is the use case where a storm, or maybe it's a blizzard, certainly it's getting cooler in the Midwest right now, hits that central office, creates an issue where essentially key systems are unavailable. And by the way, it doesn't have to be necessarily a weather-related event that could do that. Could be a ransomware attack, could be all sorts of issues. Obviously, with recent weather-related events, you can see how critical it is to have a good backup and a good failover scenario and process in place. Even if you don't lose the facility, when everything else around it is not working, not functional, or degraded in terms of service, you can't really run your operation anymore, including having people available to do so. So here, because again, remember, construction company, so let me sort of break this down for you in terms of the business. Even if you are not in this business, you'll understand very, very easily that this is an organization that's going to have, of course, pretty advanced project tracking, project management type of application or set of applications and documents associated with it that ties directly into the profitability of the business for a variety of reasons. Lots and lots of compliance-related type of documents associated with norms, the sites, the various sites, all sorts of regulatory paperwork that comes with every job site, which of course with variations across cities and states, you can imagine many, many, many documents. So where you're on a job site and you have a problem, it's very important that you could get that stuff back, because you may not be able to continue construction or development or whatever it is you're doing if you just don't have access to this. Conversely, from a business standpoint, in a central location, you need to be able to know where the resources are going, and you can't have projects that are not being tracked. Okay, so in this case, benefit of using UDP Cloud Direct is the fact that you can literally spin up all those key servers in a matter of minutes, keep those job sites running. This is, again, the benefit of having a solution that was born in the cloud and ready from the get-go to go straight to cloud and to be invoked when something happens. So if I look at it from a business standpoint, again, the benefit here is that the business interruption has been mitigated in a way that allows the customer to keep on running their operation by leveraging our solution. Next slide. So this is where I think you'll probably hear a little bit more from Stacy as we go through some of the demonstration piece. This is the very technical piece of it. It gives you a sense as to how the technology has been created. What you will see is that it's obviously based on some very robust components, and it is also, again, it has been designed by experts in the field of data center. The founders and the technologists behind this solution have experience with some of the largest data centers in the world and for the largest companies, brand names you can think of. So definitely you can see we have optimized here an environment that is not only secure but also extremely efficient. Efficiency is important and, more importantly, reliable. So lots of ways for us to cost-effectively manage what is a multi-tenant environment at scale. You should care about that. Why do we tell you this? Because as a partner who may resell our solution, you need to know that we have obviously optimized for multi-tenancy, allowing you to run a business. As an end user listening to this, you want to know that we're doing this at the best possible cost, and so we can pass on the best possible price to you without any compromise on security, quality, or ease of use. So there's more coming in the future. We keep investing quite a bit in this technology, so stay tuned. So to wrap up a little bit on UDP and our portfolio and what we do at Arcserve, obviously, backup and recovery, whether on-premise or in the cloud, we provide lots of great disaster recovery capabilities, again, hybrid, on-premise, direct to cloud. We also have high availability and archiving capabilities. We're not going to talk about them today. Just know that they're also available as part of our portfolio. And, just wanted to reaffirm here, this direct-to-cloud solution we're focusing on today requires no equipment, no hardware, no appliance on-site. You go direct to cloud, and it's a very easy, very simple solution to use. You do not need a PhD in backup to use this solution. Although Stacy has one, he doesn't need it to use it for this one. All right, Stacy. So I think we're going to go to the next slide, which is, I think, your section now with the product demonstration.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Christophe. Welcome, everybody. We're going to take a look at everything from logging in to the console, which is just a website that we hit with our credentials. And we're going to take a look at, I'm going to go in as a user as opposed to the MSP console where we can see, multiple sites. So there are two distinct different consoles. There's an MSP console where you can see all of your users that are deployed, and then there is, if it's a single company type view as well. There's no difference from the login other than the login itself would access the MSP portal as opposed to the user portal. When we first log in, first thing we'll notice here is that I haven't backed up in a while, okay? Right, so we have some notifications there as far as that goes. I'm actually in transition from one laptop to another, and this is a great use case, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that there as that goes as well. So when we first log in, we have the option to download our Cloud Direct agent onto any physical machines that I want to back up. Okay, so we can download that directly onto those machines and do the install and everything directly right from here. So to start protecting those systems, which I need to do on my laptop here. Then what we'll do is for any virtual systems that we want to protect, we're going to go through, and if it's on VMware or Hyper-V, we're going to be able to protect those agentless. So with VMware, we're going to have a virtual appliance that we download, an OVA file that gets installed, and it will discover your VMware infrastructure. And then we can, once we've discovered that, we can enable those different systems for backup, and they will appear on that other on the systems page, so that we can set up our backup policies and all of that as well. On Hyper-V, it's a little bit different. Hyper-V, we're going to download that Cloud Direct agent that we saw here on the systems page. We're going to download that directly on the hypervisor itself, and then the same thing will show up. All those systems that are installed on there will show up under the Hyper-V system. You will enable them for backup, the ones that you do want to back up, and then you can come in here and configure the backup for those systems. Okay. You can also discover new systems as they're installed. It gives you those capabilities to do that as well. And if you're running KVM, Xen, Oracle, some other hypervisor besides VMware and Hyper-V, we would then back those up as an agent-based kind of backup. So we could still support doing a Cloud Direct backup for those other hypervisors that are out there as well. Once we have these, we can go in and we can perform restores. We can do our configuration. Of course, we'd start with configuration. We go in and we decide how we want to configure those. We see that there's a new agent out here for me. We see our volumes. The default backup retention is 7 days. Okay, you can change that to any retention you want, up to an infinite retention. Right, we want you to keep your data, in our data centers, so in our location. So, whatever retention you want to set, you can definitely set that for that. Then, when do you want to run your backups? What time do you want to run your backups? And do you want to run them every day of the week, etc., like that as well. Now, Cloud Direct does take advantage of two distinct things. That's WAN optimization and multi-threading. We will use available bandwidth, so you can put in a network throttle so that we do not eat up all of the bandwidth. A lot of times in mid-market, this may be, systems may not be running anything anyways, or there's nobody working, in the evenings, but a lot of times it's 24/7 shops. Right, so you need to make sure that the backups aren't going to interfere with the day-to-day business. Right, after you get the initial backup done, we're only transferring the delta changes at that point. So we're only grabbing the change blocks after your initial backups, but we can still take advantage of throttling and put in different bandwidth throttles at different times as well for that. Under our advanced options, we can enable a local backup. I get this question quite a bit. So if we want to keep a copy, this would be the latest copy, right, on a disk destination. So if I needed to do a full system restore, or for some reason the cloud wasn't available, not meaning the Arcserve cloud, but maybe the internet in general or something like that, or your gateway to the internet maybe is not available, you can still pull data back from the most recent backup. We're not going to keep all your backups there. We're just going to keep the most recent backup, a copy of it, local in a local location there if you want to enable that. We can also enable a caching where we'll cache, just 1% of the data. So not a lot of the data is going to be cached, just a small percentage of it. This is enough to kickstart the backup, right? So once the backup goes ahead and starts, it's already got data sitting there in the cache to start transferring up right away while we start everything else up and go. So it'll make the backups start a little bit faster and speed up that process as well. We'll also give you the ability to do automatic updates, enroll in the beta programs. Probably not. You're not going to enroll in the beta program for all your systems, but maybe have one system you want to test or something like that. Or if you wanted to do it for all or none, you have that option there as well. When it comes to probably the most important, the backup tasks themselves. Right? How do we want to protect this system? Do we want to protect the entire system, the entire drive? Do we want to protect individual files and folders? That's what I'm doing on my backup of my laptop. I'm protecting a couple files. Do you have SQL Exchange? Those kind of things. We can even, support NetApp devices, and we can trigger scripts before and after the backup is run as well. So if you wanted those scripts. we can do that for you there as well. Once we've got that configured, we can go into restores right here. It's going to be the same, but I'm going to just do it right from here. So if we go into my laptop and we choose restore, and I choose my volume, which is only 7 days, and I can go in and I can browse that content, or I can go in and restore the all the content or browse down into that content. So if I go in and browse my current backup, there's my 2 little files I'm backing up, not a lot, but if I would to go in, and I might actually do this, trigger a backup of key things like my documents, things like that, and then on my new system go ahead and pull those back down to there, as opposed to copying them over manually or doing something like that as well. That would be one option there. So we can definitely pull and restore using the replication agent, pull those files back down that we wanted to do. If it was an entire system, an entire image, I could pull that entire image down if I needed to do that as well, or we can browse down into it like I just did there. Your other options, right, if we go back to my task selection and back to our systems here real quick, under virtualization, I showed you this before. This is where we can go in and we can configure how to protect that virtual environment. What do we want to do as do we want to auto sync new VMs? That's important there as well. Do we want to archive VMs that are removed from vSphere, right, on VMware? So if we've deleted those systems, but maybe we want to archive the backups, we can do that there as well. Same thing for Hyper-V. We'll have the same option there too. Now, so far we've only discussed backup as a service. If we're going to look at disaster recovery as a service, there's going to be a few key points, as Christoph noted, during the presentation. First off, once you license the disaster recovery as a service, you're going to get a call, first an email and then a call from our support team, and we're going to work with you on creating a playbook, a disaster recovery playbook, and that's going to include, configuring the VPN connectivity. What ports need to be opened on the firewall, what kind of port forwarding do we need to do, and creating all those kind of rules so that we can deliver on that less than 5-minute spin up time, right, to be able to access those systems. For us to spin up the systems themselves, it should not be, it should only be a few minutes to spin up a system, right, in most cases. It's the connectivity and making sure all that's done that we want to make sure is done there too. Nothing's worse than, okay, my DR site's up, now let me configure all my users to be able to connect to it. Right, that's it can take a long time, if you're not prepared for it and you don't know what you're doing. And you have, you're under a lot of pressure because why is your systems down? You're worrying about that. You want to make this part as seamless as possible. We want to help with that. Okay, so once you've done that and you've configured either the point to site, which in my experience, most companies are going to go with a point-to-site connectivity, their endpoints connecting up to the site. We can have a whole site-to-site connectivity that we can configure as well, and we do offer a couple of options and add-ons to this that are important for some folks out there. The ability to run a domain controller up in our site if you want to do that, as opposed to just backing up a domain controller, but have a live domain controller that's running all the time. If you needed multiple front-end IP addresses, those are all things that we can add, at a cost, right, in order to do that, but we can add those capabilities for the DR location for you as well. We see here I have a couple of systems that I have enabled for disaster recovery, and all you would do, and if we go back, there's a button where you enable for disaster recovery, and then once you're ready to spin those systems up, you're able to just go in and activate those systems, right? So activate them, it brings them up on our line, on our site as far as that goes too. We do take screenshots of the systems starting. I paused mine while it was still going here, but we'll give you a screenshot of that system actually booted up and running. We'll also do that periodically. I think it's every week. We send you a screenshot of those systems started up so that you have that there. And then you can always come in here and you can activate the systems too if you wanted to do like a manual test and get a little bit deeper than just a loading screen. You can always do that there too. There's no limitation to when you use or how long you use the DR site, right? You're going to tell us, the environment, how much memory you need in the environment, how many processors, all of that for us to be able to enable that. And then once you have that and you've paid that additional pricing for that, then you can come in here and use it whenever, how often you want to. Okay. Couple other settings here. I mentioned you can have any retention setting that you want. If we go in here to my my standard 7 days, I can come in here and I can choose anything from a forever backup to any number of years, 3 years, 7 years. Those are common, retentions in the industry as well. And then we can just do forever if you want to do that, as well as custom retention policies there too. And you can create multiple volumes, so maybe some systems and some data you need to retain forever, but a lot of data out there, if I keep it for 30 days or 2 weeks, 2 weeks seems to be common as well, that's fine. Right, but my important data, I need to keep my financial data, stuff like that. Maybe I need to keep that for 3 years or something like that. You could definitely create different volumes based on the retention period. And then when you go in and define your systems and the backups, if we go back into our configuration, remember there was a volume here, and you just choose which volume that you wanted to back up to. So maybe a custom retention, something like that. It'd be that straightforward as far as that goes. Now we do give you a couple other views. We give you, number one, a usage report where we can go in and we can see how much data was backed up, by the different systems, how much data was sent, what the size of those snapshots. So you can look at those either on a day setting, a month, or a year, right? So if you need to see that information. And then on reports, we're going to send you a couple of reports automatically anytime somebody does a restore. We're going to send you an alert based on this restore was performed. And we're also going to send you a daily digest. And the daily digest is, a digest of, everything that kind of provides, everything's happened from backups to restores. You're going to get those automatically every day. I get reports that say, hey, these systems weren't online, they weren't backed up, and right now, because my old laptop has been turned off, I'm getting those reports, hey, the backups weren't completed. We also give you the ability to go in and, perform, and pull different reports, like a specific backup report, or, account activity or data transfer reports or restore reports. You can pull those reports either on demand, or if you wanted to add a report, you can go through and choose when you want it to be delivered, how often you want it delivered, who do you want to get the report, and any additional users. So automatically you can put in different people that have access to the portal, right? But you can add in additional users. Maybe you want this to go out to like an admin account or something like that, so that they'll have it. They're not necessarily going to have the portal access, right? I'm talking about a generic like admin at xcompany.com or something like that, right? If you wanted that to go there, and you just go ahead and create that report. Lastly, we do also have the ability to go in and have different levels of users, okay? We can go in, and the default user is the admin user. They control the console itself, the portal itself. They control opening up tickets, performing restores, pretty much doing everything, right? They could do everything from an admin perspective. There is a storage admin as well that can go in, and a little bit less what they can do. They can manage the storage, so the volumes, right, the volume retention, manual recovery points, trigger off manual backups, those kind of things, and create and edit support tickets there too, so they have the ability to be able to open up support tickets. And then the last one is a restore admin. You may give this to your to your users, where they can go in and perform their own restores. Right, so they have the ability to go in and pull their own data back down. Maybe they just want to pull a file or something like that. And they have the ability to manage support tickets. So not create support tickets, but they can go in if there's a support ticket and look at the updates and everything like that. I think with end users, probably, you know, their own restores is probably going to be a little bit more common than going through the support tickets. They're probably going to reach out to the administrator to see what's going on if there happens to be a problem or anything like that. We do also support two-factor authentication, Google two-factor authentication, so you can turn that on for any of these users. You know, if you wanted that additional layer of authentication, we can do that too. Adding a user is straightforward. We just add their email, their first and last name, and then what credential or what role do we want to assign to that user. We can definitely do that there. With the MSP portal, there's only a couple additional things. It's, you know, you can see all your companies, everything all up that way. Of course, you have billing, you have, you know, rebranding of the site and those kind of things too from an MSP perspective. If I go back, I'm trying to think if there's anything else within the console. Again, remember, it's just a website that you're going to hit. You sign in with those credentials, and it's going to log you in as that user. I think at this time, Christoph, I think I'm pretty much done from a demo perspective. If we want to go out and look at any questions and answer questions that are out there.
Perfect, and thank you, Stacy. I've already answered a few questions online, but I'm going to reiterate some of them because I think they would be of interest to many of you. So let me start with one question, and maybe you know the answer, Stacy. I really do not know this one. Do you have a sense whether the site-to-site VPN is compatible with FortiGate firewall? I'm really not sure.
I don't think that there would be a limitation with that as far as that goes. We're going to use an open VPN on our side, an open source VPN, and it should be compatible with that. But again, I mean, that's why we have that team there to work with you on that piece and that configuration. So it's not just the compatibility, it's, you know, okay, it's compatible. Now we're going to also assist with the configuration and all of that as well.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any data centers outside of the U.S.? The answer is yes. We are starting to build a number of data centers outside of the U.S. The next one will be in Europe, and we're looking at other locations around the world. So if there's a specific requirement, please reach out to us and let us know. You know, depending on your use case, what you're trying to do, we may be able to help. There was a question earlier that I will cover here on whether we own our own data centers, and I think that came before we presented the slide that did that. So we use our own data centers. We do not use Amazon or Azure for the service. However, if you are in a hybrid cloud type of situation, meaning you want to back up locally first with our UDP classic, if you will, solution, and then want to leverage a relationship you have with an Amazon or an Azure, no problem. We can send that data off to AWS or Azure. We can also leverage less expensive tiers of storage if you want to do tape replacement, for example. So there are many things we can do with Amazon and Azure, but for this direct-to-cloud service, it's essentially you know, the Arcserve data center that we use in this case. And we have two of them for North America, for the US. It's USA, and it's East Coast and West Coast. So how many customers could you support at the same time in regards to spin-ups in the cloud? So the answer I provided, and Stacy, maybe you can provide your view as well, is that it's extremely scalable. So we've really designed it to be a service, so we know we could get multiple, you know, spin-ups at the same time. Certainly, I'm not really sure what the number is. I would just say that if you think you're in a case where you would invoke multiple spin-ups in our data center at the same time, we'd need to understand how many. Is it a few? Is it hundreds? I mean, it makes a difference. And the other big thing is bandwidth. Candidly, I think bandwidth is the one thing I'd be looking at. If there's a reason why you're spinning up in our multiple systems at the same time, other than for a test, in sort of a disaster recovery scenario, what happened? Is there an issue with bandwidth regionally potentially that would affect your ability to do stuff as well? So there's always bandwidth somewhere lurking around that you want to think about in those use cases. Stacy, do you have a sense as to how many spin-ups could happen at the same time? Have you heard of any limitation?
So I haven't heard of a limitation. Remember, disaster recovery as a service is on the server side. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I have been asked, with customer, they had like 400, workstations they wanted to spin up in the cloud. That is not available from a workstation standpoint. That capability is not passed through by Microsoft to be able to do DR as a service on workstation OSs. So just keep in mind it's for your server OSs. And I have not heard of any limitation, because we're going to spin up multiple, sets of hosts if you need more servers. And Christoph is 100% correct. I mean, we're going to have a lot of bandwidth going into our data center, right? So as far as that goes, so bandwidth generally is not going to be an issue from our end, but, coming into it, is there any issues from a network connectivity, that are outside of our control, those kind of things. But yeah, no limitation I've seen from a number of servers that we can spin up.
Perfect. So many other questions, so let me go through a few more here. After the system has spun up, how do we get the changes back after a disaster recovery? So I will give you my answer, and then Stacy, maybe you can add on to this. Essentially what you would do is, it's this notion of failover, which is where you would, based on your question, this would be kind of the disaster recovery, step one. Now you run from the Arcserve Cloud, and then as we do that, we can keep obviously running and changing data to those servers, and then we'd copy them back as we fail back to your original location when things are back on track. Is that a fair representation, Stacy?
It is. Keep in mind, we're going to be backing up those servers while they're up and running on our cloud, so we're capturing those changes. If you needed to pull down an entire image, you could do that, or if you needed to just pull down, change data, you can do that too.
Perfect. Thank you. So there are a few questions around cost and how much does it cost. So for this, depends on which one you're looking at, backup as a service or disaster recovery as a service. While I will not cover price points here, I can tell you that it's extremely competitive compared to other solutions. So that's my first statement. My second statement is, in backup is priced essentially based on capacity, and then you have a number of additional options depending on IP addresses and a couple of other capabilities we provide. And then the disaster recovery is an add-on, if you will, where we also look at compute, which is obviously one of the dimensions you have in disaster recovery as a service because you're spinning up VMs. So these are the two big components we keep. There are no big surprises on cost. I think some of you may have been surprised by some of the bills they've received from public cloud vendors. We keep our pricing very, very, very clear, without surprises, and it's a subscription-based model. So that's for the Cloud Direct. So what I'd like to ask you to do, though, is get in touch with us, and then we can, look at your environment. You tell us what it is you need, how much volume, how many volumes, how much data you have, and then we can give you an estimate, or work through our network of partners who would be more than happy to help you as well, and give you a quote and sell you the solution. Did you want to add anything to this, Stacy?
Well, I did see a question. Did that particular question, or did you? Are you? What do you mean?
Yeah, I was just asking. Yeah, there were a couple of questions I was trying to cover both in one.
Yeah.
So is the service available worldwide today? So today it's USA. It is going to be expanded to other geographies in Europe as well as Asia Pacific and Japan specifically, but can someone from Europe use the US system? If your internal compliance is okay with that, we certainly have no problem with that. So yes, anybody can use the US data center if they want to. What you have to consider is bandwidth, and as number one, and number two, based on your internal controls and or regulations, whether that's something you can do in terms of backing up certain types of data to a location that is not in the same geographic zone or the same country. There are multiple variations depending on the permutations of source and destination. What else? Let's see. Can we demo the product for 30 days?
Absolutely.
So I believe we have that demo available. I think it's 30 days, right? I think that's correct, right?
It is, and it starts out as a backup as a service demo, and if you need to demo disaster recovery as a service demo, you would just contact us and we would enable that disaster recovery as a service capability for you. But by default, it's backup as a service.
Perfect. Quick point, I should have mentioned it earlier, there will be a recording of this session, so we are recording this session, we'll make it available, and I think you'll get a follow-up email that gives you the link to this recording. So there was a question on, BaaS and DRaaS, different products. So they are different, but obviously complementary. As you've seen from Stacy, you kind of start with the backup as a service. You have to have the data, right? So you always will have backup as a service in our construct, and then you can add on the ability to do disaster recovery as a service. So they're essentially complementary solutions, but they're different in that, of course, the recovery time objective profiles are highly different. With backup as a service, you are essentially copying files back or looking at files in our cloud versus disaster recovery as a service where you're invoking and essentially standing up a virtual machine or set of virtual machines. What else? Let me see. Is the local backup storage option encrypted? So that's when you copy to a NAS device locally. That's a good one, Stacy. I believe it is.
Yeah, I believe so as well.
Yeah. Again, we're talking about the direct-to-cloud, where we also allow you to go copy to a NAS device locally. We do not need that. I repeat, we do not need to do that as a staging or as an intermediary step to back up to cloud. We can go straight to cloud. It's just another option we give you for those of you who want to have just local copy available. So can the solution be installed on servers and workstations?
Yes, from a server perspective, Windows gives you full system, and it gives you file and folder capabilities. Linux gives you file and folder unless that Linux machine is virtualized, and you can grab that whole image as well. In those cases, if it's on VMware or Hyper-V. From a workstation standpoint, Windows, Linux, and Mac. Windows, we can grab the full system. On Linux and Mac, we can grab files and folders.
Perfect. Yeah, and Mac is supported, as you mentioned.
Yep.
Good. Well, that was a lot of questions. I see a couple more questions. A couple of questions about other competitive options. Do we replace or compete with Acronis? And the answer is yes, absolutely. We're very competitive, and we have a great set of solutions. So depending on which part of their service you're talking about, we certainly do. And again, I think we're happy to be compared, so don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And then I think that's pretty much it for questions. Oh yeah, there's a funny one. I can't resist it. Somebody asked us where we are with the same Arcserve that was part of CA Technologies, and yes, we're not CA anymore. We haven't been for almost 4 years now. We are independent again. We carved out and are the independent Arcserve. So certainly that was in our past, but certainly not in our present anymore. Good. Stacy, do you have any closing comments or on some of the questions we've seen here? Have I missed anything?
Sure. So there was, and you may have covered this, but there was a question around bandwidth. So I want to kind of talk about that just for a moment. There's no limitation from our perspective of requirement of bandwidth. It's always going to come back to amount of data, amount of changes, that we can ingest it, right? And we can take advantage of multi-threading to send that data up, fine. Sometimes, I get customers that they don't always have the best bandwidth available, right? So in those cases, it may just take longer to send that data up to us. We can also seed that data. We can send you a disk, and you can go ahead and put that data, the full backup on that disk, and then we can ingest that data so that after that, we're only grabbing the change blocks. So keep that in mind. If you don't have the best, sometimes people are like, well, we don't have the best internet connection or the fastest internet connection, so this isn't an option for us. It really comes down to the amount of changes that you have and everything like that as well. So if you're on the fence from that standpoint, that's really when I suggest taking a look at the trial, see what it's going to be like for you, and see if that's going to be acceptable. You may bring in systems, one system at a time, maybe do a staged rollout or something like that. But definitely, I wouldn't let that be, a detractor right from the beginning. Make sure you do all of your testing and your due diligence in that method first.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining this webcast. You have our phone number here. Please contact us by email or give us a quick call if you have any further questions, or get in touch with one of our resellers. And thank you very much, Stacy, for your help today. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.